First of all, thank you so much for being with us. And I would like to ask you about the, Western media, which is reporting that the U.S. administration is ready to ease the sanctions against Russia and is calling the European allies to do the same if there is an agreement on ceasefire with Ukraine, as I understand it. Are you expecting the lifting of some Russian sanctions, anti-Russian sanctions, in the foreseeable future, Mr. Browder?
No, I'm not.
Oh.
I don't know what the U.S. is intending to do, but what I can say is that the European Union and the U.K. have no intention of lifting sanctions. And furthermore, the entire concept of a ceasefire it seems to be a fiction. Vladimir Putin announced a 30-hour ceasefire in which he didn't actually act on the ceasefire. And I don't think that anybody outside of the United States has any interest in rewarding Russia for all the actions of taking Ukraine that they've done so far by lifting sanctions. And so I think it's very unrealistic, and I think even a fantasy that the European Union and the UK would lift sanctions.
Okay, European Union, I got it. But there is a very different from the previous administration position of Donald Trump's administration. And there are quite, obvious signals coming from Washington that the sanctions may be lifted. Do you think this is possible, the American sanctions canceled totally or maybe partially?
Well, it's very difficult to predict the Trump administration because they change their position from one day to the next. We have definitely heard the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, at the very beginning of negotiations with Sergei Lavrov, intimate that they would ease sanctions. Mm-hmm. So there is some possibility that the U.S. would ease sanctions. At the same time, the U.S. doesn't have any particular incentive to do so unless they're getting something in return. And at the moment, there's not a whole lot that Vladimir Putin is offering the U.S. in return. And so I think that Trump, who values himself as a big deal maker, would have to see something pretty material in order to ease sanctions on Russia.
Do you think, maybe this particular cases of Western businesses who may be ready to go back to Russia? For example, McDonald's or Starbucks, there has been some reporting in Russian media that they are actually thinking about going back, but no proofs of that, no proofs. Maybe this is just a disinformation campaign coming from Kremlin, or some of American businesses are really thinking about Russian market.
Well, I think it's a fantasy. It's very unrealistic that American businesses will come back to Russia. Mm-hmm. First of all, even before the war started, most American businesses were having a pretty hard time in Russia because of all the raider attacks, the rule of law, all the difficulties that they were having. And then, of course, all this nastiness that started after the war, in which all their businesses were being basically expropriated from them at very low cost or low values. It's kind of hard to imagine that any responsible American business would then step up and set foot. And furthermore, I would say that while the Trump administration seems to be more sympathetic towards Putin, the American people aren't. And I think more than 90% of the American people have a negative view of Vladimir Putin. And I think that would probably be commercially suicidal for someone like McDonald's to set up and start selling in Russia again.
And what do you think about the signals that are coming from Washington, again, from the Donald Trump's administration, about the Crimea, about, officially recognizing Peninsula as a part of Russia? What do you think about that? Is this possible, actually?
Well, everything is possible when it comes to the Trump administration. So, I mean, if you look at the votes at the United Nations, you had the U.S. voting alongside Russia, Iran, North Korea, Eritrea on various resolutions that everybody was voting against. And so it's possible that the U.S. would recognize Crimea under the current administration. I think it's absolutely a non-starter and will not happen for any other country among the allies, among the European Union, Canada, Japan, et cetera, to recognize the annexation of Crimea. I just don't see that as.
But what would be the consequences of this kind of decision if it is made by the U.S.?
Well, I think this would isolate the United States from the rest of the world from a geopolitical standpoint. If the U.S. were to do that, it's been a consistent position of the United States not to recognize and to be against Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea. And so for the United States to change that position, I think would be put them at odds with the rest of the world. And I think it would also put the U.S. administration at odds with the American people. The American people don't want to see something like that happening. And so I think that it would be a pretty bold step to take. I think it would be, I don't see where the upside is for Donald Trump to take it. So I think, it's stuff that's been floated out there, but I've seen a lot of things floated out there which don't come to fruition. So I don't think that if I were Vladimir Putin, I wouldn't be banking on that as something that's going to happen anytime in the near future.
I would like to hear your opinion about the motives of Donald Trump and people who work with him and for him in Washington. I know that you have connections with different politicians in the U.S. What do they tell you? What is really going on? And does Donald Trump really think that there is a ceasefire coming in a week or so? Or maybe he has other ideas and goals in this?
Well, so what's important to understand is that in the United States, in the political environment in the United States, there's not a lot of sympathy for Vladimir Putin and support for Russia in this whole thing. And I say that not just in terms of the American people, but I'm also saying it in terms of the Republican establishment. You can look at people like Lindsey Graham, Senator Roger Wicker, various other Republican senators. They're not friends of Putin. They're not friends of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I don't think that they support any of this kind of stuff. And so what Donald Trump is up to is something that only Donald Trump understands what he's doing. It certainly doesn't make sense on the surface. It doesn't make sense from a political point of view. It doesn't make sense from a popularity point of view. And so whatever he thinks he's going to get out of it and whatever the people working for him think they're going to get out of it, it's a mystery. It's a secret that none of us really know.
I was wondering, as a person who dedicated years of the life to Magnitsky Act, what do you feel right now? Are you disappointed or sad or angry or anything else? Looking at what's happening right now.
I think the best way to describe it is I'm in a bit of a state of shock. When Sergei Magnitsky was murdered November 16, 2009, so we're talking about more than 15 years ago. And when I went on a campaign to get justice for Sergei Magnitsky, the country that was most robust in supporting me in my campaign was the United States of America. The United States was always first to do things. The Magnitsky Act in the United States passed in 2012. The next country that passed the Magnitsky Act was Canada, and it was only in 2017. And then the European Union only did it in 2020. And so the United States has always been my most stalwart ally. They were always the most black and white about this whole thing, the most tough when it came to viewing Vladimir Putin and Russia as he should be viewed. And so for the United States to now be the country that flips, that becomes his ally, is just shocking. It's hard to put any other word on it. What does it all mean? I guess we're going to see over the next weeks, months, years. My initial reaction is just I'm in a state of shock. It's hard for me to imagine that the country that was most robust on this is now completely doing a 180-degree turn.
Yeah, I can feel your pain. I assume you know Marco Rubio personally. The U.S. Foreign Secretary used to be a big fighter against Vladimir Putin. And when you describe that times when, the U.S. were robust and very tough on Russia and on the, human rights violation, he was one of the brightest politicians in Washington. Now he is one of the Trump team. What is he now? And how would you describe this change in Marco Rubio? And how would you explain it?
Well, Marco Rubio made a decision that he wanted to be Trump's Secretary of State. And so he's no longer an independent politician. He's now a dependent politician. He depends for his job on Donald Trump. And so he has to fulfill the wishes of Donald Trump. I imagine it must be very difficult for him to go into these situations saying the things that he's saying now, because they're, as you mentioned, completely contrary to his position before. And I imagine it must be hard for him to to sort of reconcile the old Marco Rubio with the new Marco Rubio, because, of course, everybody knows that he was the toughest guy on Russia before. He was one of the first people I always went to when we were trying to get things done with policy towards Russia. So very, very difficult for him, I would imagine, to be sitting in this position. And he has to do one of two things. He either has to carry on basically betraying his previous beliefs, or he has to quit. And so far, he has not decided to quit. And so he's putting himself in this position where I'm sure it must be very difficult to go to sleep at night, making these decisions, knowing exactly what his positions were beforehand.
Just a little follow-up. You cannot go to Marco Rubio now, like you did before, when you have something on your table, something on your mind. Can you call him, just said, I need help?
Well, if I called him and I said I need help, it would go against the wishes of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is his boss, and he is not going to betray his boss. So It doesn't make any sense for me to go to Marco Rubio at the moment.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this. I really appreciate this opportunity. See you soon on TV Rain again.